as you are aware, that primary area of operation for RERA is a planning area. So projects which are outside the planning area, though there is a dispensation, but broadly they are out of the purview. Similarly, projects which are smaller than 500 square meters or less than 8 apartments are also not presently within the purview of RERA. So I just wanted to put this definition up front because there is an area where the other forums would be more useful, for example, the Consumer Forum or NCLT, which are not covered under the jurisdiction of RERA.
Right.
So that was a preliminary point I wanted to make.
Yes.
Having said that, for in UP, for example, we have about 2,700 projects which are registered with RERA. We have about 23,000 complaints which had come about, of which more than 17,000 we have been able to settle. And out of this 2,700, there are about 650 projects which are new, and about 2,100 are ongoing projects.
Right.
So that's broadly where we stand.
So with the number of, I mean, when the central government talks about the stress fund, they do keep mentioning that the NCR, there are so many incomplete projects and the stress funds were created to execute. What is the role here? Does RERA have a role here, and what is that?
See, as far as the scheme is concerned, one of the prerequisites for eligibility of any project to take advantage of the stress fund is that it should be RERA registered.
Right.
So therefore, all the projects, and the logic of doing it is that projects which were completed before RERA obviously would not need a stress fund,
Sure.
because they were by definition complete.
Right.
So they have to be registered with RERA. Apart from that, because this is also our responsibility to see that people get their houses, we have been trying to convey the contours of the project. We have been interacting with the promoters. We have written to them. We have held workshops with them, so that to sensitize them as to what is the area of operation as far as stress fund is concerned. There are a couple of side issues which do come in the picture. For example, there are some projects which would need extension in their time. If they get an extension, they are registered with RERA.
Yeah.
So we have been taking up these issues with our authorities, the planning authorities for our areas,
Yeah.
and they have been very positive. Along with it, the UP government for NCR especially, they had taken a cabinet decision of giving the benefit of zero period to a number of projects which were eligible. That again would go to improve the viability of the project and also help in quite a few of them getting their map extensions, etc.
Map extensions and maybe restructuring their loans as well, right?
As the rescheduling of their loans, or basically their dues for the land which they have taken, would be facilitated surely once they are eligible for a zero period, because their overall liability will come down.
Right. Sir, you mentioned that 17,000 cases have been disposed of. One of the problems that consumers across the country have had is that RERA orders, and that is a positive thing that you get the RERA order, but the execution of the orders has been a little tardy. But I believe you are working on it. We did raise this issue in your Lucknow meet as well. Please tell us if there's any way forward from there.
There are 3-4 issues I think we would like to highlight here.
Yeah.
One is that we have a system in place today.
Yeah.
If somebody has an order from RERA where the date of compliance is over,
Yeah.
and the compliance has not been done, in that case, right on the complaint page, there is a button which says execution request.
Yeah.
So one has to just fill up that,
Yeah.
so that we are aware that the execution has not yet completed.
Right.
And we have now a fairly robust system of following up on those complaints. There is a 3-stage process here. One is that we do issue a final notice to the promoter, giving him 15 days for a compliance. And if the compliance is still not done, there is section 63 of the RERA Act, under which there can be a penalty on the builder on a per day basis for default or not complying with that order, which can go up to 5% of the project cost.
Right.
And we have in certain cases imposed that. Recently, one of the builder has been imposed a project cost of 1.2 crores.
Right.
And we are in the process of doing this a little more.
Right.
The second tier is about issuance of the recovery certificate.
Yeah.
There again, presently the compliance rate is closer to 20%. But what we have discovered that with constant follow-up and so on and so forth, this rate is improving.
Okay.
And the third thing which we have found very useful is that we have identified 25 builders which had the largest numbers of pending orders.
Right.
So these cover almost 60% of the total orders which we have issued. And we have been calling these promoters, reviewing with them, understanding by when these compliances will be done. And this is an ongoing process, and we have found that this is more effective than just
The stick.
issuing a paper.
Yes. Prabhakar, you had something to ask him?
Now, suppose they still don't, they comply your order, and they still keeps defaulting. Then what is the solution with the buyer or with the customer? Where will they go in that situation?
See, the point is that I mentioned there is this provision under 63,
Yeah.
and 5% of the project cost for each case
He doesn't pay. Then
is
what will he do?
there is again, you have an option of a recovery certificate. And the recovery certificate is probably one of the most effective ways of complying with.
It goes to district magistrate?
It
or-
goes to the district magistrate, the Amin then follows it up. There is various stages of it.
Okay.
There is a citation, person can be put up in revenue lockup if he's personally liable or she's personally liable, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is also a provision that if non-compliance is there is a provision that a case can be filed in a magistrate's court where a person would be punishable by 3 years of imprisonment.
A case will be
Though-
filed by RERA?
That will be done by RERA,
Mhm.
though this is compoundable.
Sir, also tell us about the conciliation forums, because like you said, dialogue seems to work better than the stick. So tell us about that process. For those of you who don't know what the the conciliation process is, let's understand that.
Once a person goes, as you're aware that our whole system is online as far as filing a complaint is concerned. And we are in the process from next month onward to convert into e-court system. And I think in another couple of months' time, after filing an online complaint, a person will only have to come for the final stages of argument once
Okay.
before a case is disposed of.
Okay.
So we hope in 3-4 months' time, with everybody's cooperation, this whole process of the casework will be facilitated. Having said that, once a person is filing a complaint, he gets a pop-out advising him whether he would or she would like to consider the conciliation process.
Yeah.
In the conciliation process, once a request has been made, there is no fees to be paid. The promoter is asked whether he accepts this request, and once they say yes, immediately the person is asked to pay the fee, which is 1,000 rupees, and the conciliation process is on.
Right.
The result and the outcome of conciliation is more than 80% of the cases do get resolved
Yeah.
in 1 or 2 sittings. So it's quicker.
Do they comply with the timelines that they promise in court?
Broadly, whatever is decided in the conciliation,
Yeah.
the compliance is much, much higher than otherwise. So
Okay.
the cost of compliance is lower.
Yeah.
Both parties have agreed, therefore they both have interest in seeing that this gets done.
And still if they don't comply with that
The
conciliation?
person has an option to file a formal complaint.
To be with you people only?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, we've got a large number of queries started coming in. Let's address them. There is Sanjay Kumar Jha who says, Good evening, Jai Shri ma'am. I want to know from Rajiv sir, how many FIRs have been filed against any builder under RERA till date and any positive outcome, especially in the NCR region?
Mr. Jha, the point is that FIR is a stage which is primarily meant for a criminal offense. And as you would be aware that the RERA proceedings actually relate to enforcement of an agreement which the buyer and the builder had signed. And per se, this is not a criminal action. However, when we had found in two cases that there have been substantial diversion of funds, we had requested the state government that an SIT should be formed to investigate in that. There, the matter has been approved by the state government, and the SIT is investigating in these two matters.
Right. There's Deepak Jain who says, Dear Madam, I want to ask Mr. Chairman, why is there no time limit for the builder to accept the conciliation? I have applied for conciliation and the builder is sitting tight and not accepting. What is the recourse?
I would like to suggest to you is that we have essentially a timeline of 21 days within which the promoter has to say yes or no. And in case nothing is happening, I would advise you to immediately file a formal complaint. The process of conciliation also, we were working on the software where this would happen automatically. So I think from February onwards, this transfer will be automatic, that if promoter is not accepting, it will go with a request to you whether you would like to file a complaint. But don't wait. If there is no response, please file a formal complaint.
Roshni from Noida is asking, my question to Rajiv sir, since most of the RERA orders remain on paper, RERA should be made stronger with judicial powers in order to provide relief to home buyers. I want to know what is UP RERA's plan for seeking judicial powers. Does RERA need judicial powers, sir?
I think as I had earlier mentioned, there is a mix of what is required for enforcing of the orders. And I think as and when the liquidity in the system further improves, although I would say that both the central government as well as the state government have taken a number of measures as far as real estate sector is concerned, which you would be surely aware. But as this liquidity further improves, it will facilitate better compliance. Having said that, as I had mentioned earlier, we are running a 3-tier arrangement for following up on the orders. Including one-to-one with the promoters to ensure that it is complied with. I think in coming days, the compliance rate is going to further improve, and I'm quite sure that the next coming months will see a better real estate sector than we have been seeing in the last couple of years.
That's a positive statement because I noticed that even at Lucknow, where all the RERA regulators were present, one of the main issues that all RERA regulators were talking about is how you can enforce the compliance to the orders, right? There is a lady.
I would like to supplement here
Yes,
with. See, the judicial process of compliance is that essentially the matter goes to a magistrate in a civil court, where they issue a notice to the opposite party which has to comply. This goes as a regular suit, almost a regular suit. Finally, a decree is enforced through an ameen.
Yeah.
So to that extent, if a recovery certificate is issued and a civil court issues ameen, through the ameen they get this recovery done.
Yeah.
It's a close parallel.
Yeah.
And the recovery certificate through the collector is a much quicker process than the more formal system in the court.
So RC is issued by collector on your request.
We issue a recovery certificate and the collector then gets it enforced.
Okay.
There is Arun Kumar, and this is, I think he's speaking for a lot of consumers. He's an end user, and he says, I have a house in Greater Noida. The project is stuck for 5 years. I'm living on rent and paying my EMIs. When this problem for home buyers will be solved, shall I ask for a refund? Now, he's an end user, he's not an investor who's just asking for a refund. What is your advice to such consumers?
I would like to put some statistics here. Uh, there is, of course, a huge pain has been inflicted on a lot of people like
Yes.
our friend who is
Yeah.
an empire. I do hear every day in our forum that a person has to pay his EMI, he has to pay his rent apart from meeting up all other family expenses, and people are under great stress because of these reasons. Now, if we look at the numbers, for example, in UP, projects which were registered with UP RERA with an end date of 2017, almost 70% have either got a completion certificate or an OC or they have applied for one. 2018 end date, this number is about 60%.
Okay.
So the point which I'm trying to make it is that with everybody's collective effort, the compliance and closure on a lot of projects is taking place. Now, obviously, even with 70%, there is a 30% piece which remains.
Yeah.
And if it is end 2017, that means that we are minus 2
Yeah.
years already.
Yes.
So, with that, I think the key issue here is that a lot of people come to us with a request like that.
Yeah.
Project is well located.
Yeah.
It was allocated or allotted at the time where the rates were low.
Yeah.
The price and the location combination is such that one would like to stick to that project. So here the key is that if the promoter is around and committing to completing the project in a given time, right? I think it may be useful to stay around.
Okay.
But in case the promoter is missing in action,
Yeah.
is he in jail, he's not traceable, those are the areas where I think asking for a refund is
But
good
if
option.
not traceable, then to whom to ask?
Ultimately, a recovery has to be made. And for example, in some cases, the district magistrates are attaching some property of the project without jeopardizing the project. And that money will go to repay the money. So here, I think we have to take a case-to-case kind of a call rather than a generic call.
Sir, even in some cases, the UP RERA has stepped in and said, let us help the consumers complete the project, right?
I think there are two sections in RERA. One is section 7, which provides for revocation of registration of a project in case there are grave irregularities.
Right.
Primarily, it could be diversion of funds. It could be that the promoter is unable to complete. Promoter is not in a position to complete for different reasons, not getting into it. So we have proceeded in a couple of cases under section 7. And obviously all orders are appealable. But we are moving ahead in a few of such projects. The second set is where the deadline has expired. So under section 8 and revoked projects under section 7, how to proceed is given under section 8. There, in consultation with the state government, RERA authorities are required to give it to the RWA or to the planning authority or find a third person to complete the project. Now here it has to be done on a case-to-case basis because we have to find a way ultimately to complete the project.
So once it is given to either to the RWA or to a new contractor,
Right.
then will it be registered again with you or not?
The point here is that once the registration has lapsed or revoked and it is under the guidance of RERA, further action is being taken, there is no specific provision for it to be re-registered. Having said that,
Now, how will you monitor in that case?
sorry,
How will you monitor in
what we do is that we put an auditor and we have a monitoring committee in all such cases. There is an escrow account. This monitoring committee has people of the RWA or the buyers group. We have one of our representatives there. and we regularly monitor.
But it will not be reported on the website?
The same project will be reported on the website with further details. That this is the current progress, this is the QPR, and so on and so forth.
So deregistration doesn't mean that it will be removed from the website also.
In fact, even completed projects will not be removed from the website. So once you have registered a project, whether it is deregistered, completed, or in the process of getting completed, that database continues on the website.
Sir, you also have taken action, sent notices to some of the developers for not filing that quarterly updates, right?
Right.
Tell us how important that is and what is the progress on that?
See, in the primarily there are two instruments under RERA. One is that 70% of all the monies which are received, they are earmarked for construction of the project or for repayment of the land.
Yeah.
And there is a provision that there is an escrow account.
Right.
So if this process works well, then we are quite confident that the project will be completed. Because the land was already there once it was registered, there is a map which is approved, and then you have funds on the escrow account up to 70% of whatever has been received to complete the project. So given this combination, now person would like to know what is the quarterly progress based on what the original promoter had submitted. From that perspective, QPRs are very important. We have been pursuing with it. For everybody, I must say it's a learning process also.
Yeah.
And slowly the builders are getting into the habit of filing their QPRs, and then there is also a provision for annual accounts to be uploaded. So we had issued notice to more than 1,000 of these folks. We have also recovered penalty of about 1 crore out of that. And the compliance rates are slowly improving.
But sir, before registering a project, you don't go for the financial closure of a project. Now suppose a project is launched, the 70% provision is also there and is ready to adhere to.
Right.
But he could sell only 10% of the project or 15% of the project.
Right.
Now even if the 70% of the sales proceeds comes into the account, that is not sufficient enough to continue the construction or complete the construction.
Right.
So then, though he is not violating the rule, but still for buyers, those 15% buyers, things are not moving in the right direction. If he is not bringing in money from his own pocket or from some other way, then buyer will come to you finally.
Right.
And what will you do in that case?
What we are in the process of finalizing is that to signal what kind of a promoter and project we have on the table, we are getting a kind of a 5-star, 4-star rating system on. So that framework is presently being done by our consultant. We hope another month we would be seeking public comments on what they propose. And the idea is that at a glance, you get one single number to tell what are the RERA compliances of that promoter for earlier projects, what are the RERA compliances for the promoter and the project, what have been their track record, what is their financial strength. All those things will go into the rating system. So that once that process gets on the way, I think it will facilitate. But as far as your question is concerned, whether a person is able to market or not, that's an area which is not examined by RERA. It only provides that 70% money or whatever is received, whether financial institutions or through individuals, that will go to
But then what is important? Whether to put the 70% money or to complete the project as per the schedule. Because they must give schedule first of all that okay, on second year they will reach to this stage, third year to this stage,
Right.
and they will complete in the fourth year. Now the issue is this, that if he had already given you financial closure, that even if suppose the sales are not coming, so then he will raise the fund from the financial institution and could complete the project.
Right.
Now he is not doing this, and now even if you are going to enforce that 70% part only, so then ultimately, sir, your role is to get the project completed and buyer satisfied.
Right.
So
where will
before
this
you
come?
answer, I want to raise one more flag here.
Mhm.
In India, it was consumer receivables that built projects.
Mhm.
And the developer used to get consumer receivables and you also used to take project finance. Globally, it is project finance is required to complete projects, and the developer, when he launches a project, has to figure out
Exactly.
how that project can be completed.
See, The question which you have raised is an excellent one, and it takes me back to my Harvard days. When I was doing a course on capital markets in the Harvard Business School, one of the first lectures, the professor who was teaching us told us that speculators make the market. So while we do use speculators in a certain sense, but they have a very important role in making the market. The issue, if you look at the trajectory of how we have got into this hotspot over the last 15 years, there has been a great role of speculators and builders in this whole cycle which you have seen very closely over your career.
Yes.
So, as has been rightly said by Madam Jayashree, that primarily in our country, because the concept was not of selling completed projects or completed houses or completed plots, we do a pre-launch, then we do a launch, then we continue selling it as we go ahead. And people with different risk appetites, they come in the project at different stages. The result of all what you have just said has happened that today if there is a completed project, it has a very different market dynamics compared to something which is under construction. So people have also learned in the process. And when you say of project closure, because when this act was being framed, the understanding was that substantially projects get funded out of the proceeds, whether it was our good old, EMI till possession scheme, or this was subvention scheme, or whatever, or one is taking loan on oneself. So from that perspective, if you are able to sell, you complete the project quickly. But anybody with some marketing skills does not launch, say for example, all 10 towers together. You do a marketing for 2 towers, complete it, whether out of resources received or out of your own funds or from financial institutions, and then move on to next phase, third phase, and RERA has that provision. The same project you can register in different phases.
So you mean to say that the risk in under construction project is still there, despite the fact that RERA is monitoring it?
What I would tell you is that Madam Jayashree and Magic Brick had done a fabulous survey for our first national RERA conclave in Lucknow on 4th of November. And I was actually very astounded to see there was a question in the questionnaire which said that if there is a deep discount on a project but it is not RERA registered, would you be interested? 10% straight away said yes, and 18% said they will examine. So even with all the crisis around, despite RERA being around for almost 2.5 years now, there are
28%.
almost 28% people who are still willing to jump in that
That's given.
deep
That's
well.
given. But you are not saying that the risk will be reduced to almost zero because now RERA is there.
See, the
In
point
the projects
is,
which are launched after 2017.
what I would answer your question is like that the risk would be mitigated to a substantial extent. In our lives, there is no 100% zero risk anywhere.
Sir, Deepak Jain, whom you answered a little while ago, he says the builder is not accepting the conciliation, then where should we go? He should come back to RERA.
He should immediately file a complaint with RERA on the website.
And Shiv Kumar says, I requested for conciliation and paid 1,000 rupees 2 months back in RERA, but no response. What to do next? He should. How do they track?
You just send us a request saying that you have already deposited 1,000 rupees, and we'll convert it into a formal complaint without an additional fee to be paid.
Nipun from Faridabad says this is more of a suggestion to kindly ensure compliance of RERA norms by builders on UP RERA portal. Most of the project's completion date have already passed, but the builder hasn't complied with RERA norm of filing updates on status, progress and quarterly targets. Shiv Kumar, this is exactly what Sir was addressing. Nipun, this is exactly what Sir was addressing, that there is an effort, you have issued notices on Munish Chauhan says Supertech not giving flats since 2010. We are filing case in RERA also, but nothing got till now.
Individual case
Actually,
would not be
individual.
taken.
We will not take individual
Yeah.
cases. I would request you to actually say that if you have a problem, make it a generic problem, and let's see how it can be addressed.
Yeah, even if anybody has an individual issue, then we have our senior officers and members of the bench which are available at the Greater Noida office as well as our Lucknow head office. So please feel free to contact them either on email or otherwise.
So there is a statistic I'd like to put up to you. One of the lawyers on our show said that just 5% of consumers actually, the end users actually go to any court, whether it's RERA, NCLT, civil courts and so on. 95% of people are actually watching and waiting and watching and trying to see whether it will be resolved. Do you agree?
Let me answer it in a slightly different fashion. Suppose that there is a tower
Yeah.
where cases are filed, and by the efforts of everybody, including RERA, the builder applies for an OC for that particular tower. Maybe there are 3 complaints for that particular tower, but the project gets an OC.
Yeah.
So I think everybody is benefited.
Yes.
And therefore, if a substantial number of people are not filing, they are also beneficiaries of this whole process.
Right. There is Brachendra Jha, Faridabad, who says which projects in the NCR will get the help of the stress funds. There's a lot of consumers want to know about the stress funds and whether their projects are eligible.
I think this is a matter which is within the purview of SBI Ventures, which are examining, and they are actually being nominated by the central government to be the window for operating the stress fund. So broadly, to begin with, my understanding is that apart from those 4-5 eligibility criteria, they are also looking at projects which can be quickly completed with not very large amount of money. I'm told that 5 projects in the country were already approved for in principle, and once this ball is set rolling, I'm sure that the builders have actually to give them all the information. That process is on for a large number of projects, but unless there is a formal approval by SBI Ventures, we would not be in a position to say that this is going to get the fund or it's not going to get the fund.
Sure. Sir, we have queries from the rest of, we have consumers from all over the country, but this is a generic query I thought maybe you can answer. Manish Yadav from Gurugram says, can I file a complaint in RERA if my case against the builder is already going on in court?
The provision under RERA is that if there is a matter which is already pending in the consumer forum, then unless you withdraw from there, you would not be able to file in RERA.
Yeah.
So you have to take a call whether to continue there or withdraw and come to RERA. Secondly, the IBC provision is that if any matter has been taken up by NCLT and an IRP has been appointed, then all proceedings, including in RERA, go to abeyance.
So does RERA and the IRP work together to complete the project?
There is a recent trend where we find that the IRPs feel that RERA also has a positive role to play. And in a couple of cases which have gone to NCLT, we have been in touch.
Yeah.
And to that extent, when the Honorable Court said that all the 3 have to work in harmony, which is the Consumer Forum and NCLT and RERA, in couple of cases, we are seeing that happen.
But even when an IRP takes over a project, does the project still have to get registered in RERA?
See, the IRP effectively is a person who's holding on the company's operations.
Yes.
And therefore, he is not exempt from compliance of any statutory requirement, including for RERA.
Right. So the project still gets registered in RERA.
It has to be
The quality of construction and everything has to be maintained in that.
That is as the management is with the IRP for this interim period till the matter is resolved.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it is IRP.
Sir, one question I want to ask here. This today, this stress fund is mainly for those projects where enough fund is there so that they can refund the money or return the money to the stress fund with 15% return.
Right.
That means those which are really stressed, and stalled, and where the juice is not much left also. Now, the responsibility to complete those projects are still on you then. So what are you doing for that?
See, there are two issues I'd like to clarify. You see, the RERA Act provides with a route for resolution, as I mentioned, under section 7 and 8. So it isn't as if there is a responsibility. But what we have seen in a couple of cases where the project per se was in a deficit, I think we have to handle it on a case-to-case basis. There are a couple of ways of resolving it. One is that there may be a possibility of an additional FAR which will get some additional money to the project. There may be some piece of land which is left which can be utilized for raising additional resources. There could be another project of the promoter along with it which is more viable. So linking the two projects is another way in which you can do it. Now, if they are both registered with RERA, we can come up with some plan. But the most important process in resolution, what we have discovered is actually how proactive the group of buyers are. Because in many cases, even today we had 2 meetings for a particular builder where 4 of the towers are completed. The other 4, the buyers are getting together. And they have tied up with the builder that this is the amount which he will contribute, this is the amount which the buyers owe for that project, and combined they will be able to complete it. Now, this kind of solution is coming up in quite a few projects. In fact, in an extreme case, the buyers actually got together, raised another 800 rupees a square feet, paid off the financial institution additional, because they had bought it at a very cheap price decade ago, and paid off the financial institution, told the builder, we'll settle our affairs, complete it, thank you very much.
And here RERA becomes the...
So we are the facilitator, we can help in monitoring, we can look at the escrow mechanism and so on and so forth.
So you are gearing up for that.
So there are, in fact, this is a great help if the promoters can, and see the buyers, you have excellent architects, you have chartered accountants, there's so much of talent. Some of them, if they can get together, they can do many more projects, leave alone that project.
So one of the things that you as consumers should be doing is organizing yourself into strong groups, figuring out what your strengths are, and come to RERA to help in the conciliation process, right? We are in the last 7 minutes of our show. We still have a lot of questions to go. As many as we can accommodate, we will. There is Suman Dogra of Noida who says, can a developer charge for parking? Shall I go to RERA? Does RERA take issues like this? And if so, how?
Here there are a couple of issues. One is that in the Maharashtra law, the provision is that if the common facilities are all handed over to the RWA, then subsequently open parking cannot be sold. Right?
Once it is handed over.
Yeah, because or if the promoter has already charged for that open land while working out the details, or if the agreement says FOC, as far as car parking is concerned, surely he has no right to charge.
Right.
But there are a lot of agreements which clearly spell out that this is the amount of money which shall be paid for car parking. So it will depend on what agreement Madam Dogra has with the meter.
So whatever the agreement, whatever the terms of the agreement, that is what is enforced.
Right.
So open car parking can also be sold in that situation.
In case, for example, the development authorities in many cases do not charge for additional space other than where the building is in the costing.
Okay.
And they only operate on cost plus basis. For example, GDA, Awas Vikas Parishad and so on. In those cases, if the land cost is to be amortized, they have to recover it from somewhere. So it depends on case to case where we stand.
Neha Vashisht says she bought a 2 BHK flat and the builder promised possession in August 2018. But till now, we are waiting for possession. Can we ask for a delay penalty? Now, delay penalty is something that a lot of people have been asking. Maybe you'd like to address.
Yeah.
There is under section 18 of RERA, if the possession is not handed over by the builder within time, then there are two routes forward. One is that a person can decide to quit, take the money with interest, and that's it. The second is, because most of the people are interested in having a house, that they can claim delay interest or compensation on whatever property they are waiting for, which will be calculated on every month basis of delay. So the cutoff here is, and this was based on an Honorable Supreme Court's ruling, that the day the builder gets an OC or a CC or a building is declared fit to occupy, or the date of offering possession, whichever is later, from your contract date till this date, you are eligible to get the amount. However, if a person has already taken possession, if you are staying there, we do get occasionally such cases where they still want delay penalty. I think then Section 18 is not operational because this provision is not there.
If a
What is the
consumer,
rate of delay for this penalty?
The rate of interest which has been advised by the state government, it's different from state to state. In UP, it is the State Bank of India's marginal home loan plus 1%,
Okay.
which is about 9.5% or 9.4%.
Even if the contract says say 5 rupees per square feet or 10 rupees.
What
per
in
square feet.
UP RERA we have been doing is that from the date when the first notification of RERA was done, which is 1st May 2016, prior to that, whatever the agreement says, if the delay is after that, it is MCLR plus 1%.
Oh.
Sir, Nitin Rajput says, can a consumer check how much money a builder has for constructing a project? Similar question, how can I check with UP RERA that a project will not go into loss after I have purchased it?
The second one is not very clear. That how
He says when he buys a project, is there some, if it is a RERA registered project, can he be assured that the project will go through to completion? I think that's what
In fact, the whole architecture of RERA is designed to see that projects are completed. For example, one of the major issues which have arisen why projects in NCR are delayed is because of land issues. Now, in RERA presently, the land has to be available with the promoter. He has to disclose if there are any legal issues relating to that land when he seeks a registration or she seeks a registration. And there is an escrow mechanism. So we have a map which is passed so that clearances are not an issue. You have land which is available, any encumbrance is also clearly laid down, and we have a escrow mechanism. So this is the tripod: registration, escrow account, and thereafter monitoring, based on which the confidence has actually increased over the last 2 years.
But suppose, sir, a developer starts selling a project, say at 3,500 rupees a square feet, whereas everybody understands that at that price, project cannot be constructed. The minimum price should have been 4,200. But that developer intends to sell as many projects, as many flats possible, and then run away. Suppose that is the kind of a situation. So can RERA preempt that kind of a situation?
See, the presumption now is that he has invested in land, he has got his map cleared,
Yeah,
and then he starts his marketing.
yeah, market.
So, unlike the earlier situation, where, for example, he would get land at 10% of the price and then rest is all to be given in future.
Yeah.
Presently, we are in a very different scenario. And once I have put in all my money in land, obviously my interest in running away is fairly limited.
Okay.
Right?
Sir, are plot projects covered in RERA? One of our consumers was.
Sorry?
Plot projects.
Yes. What is covered is any residential project which may be either a flat or a plot, and commercial projects. What is not covered at the moment is industrial project or similar sheds or whatever we do for industries, and so on. So commercial and residential, whether flatted or plotted, they are all covered.
Our last 2 minutes of the show, Sonua Sarkar says, can an ongoing project approved by a Gram Panchayat be registered under RERA?
Here, as I mentioned to
Yes.
begin with, that under normal circumstances, it's the planning area which is the jurisdiction for RERA.
Yeah.
However, if the project is outside the planning area, then for example in UP, the Zilla Parishad passes a map for a particular project. And there is a provision that in public interest, RERA can direct the promoter to register that project with RERA. The prerequisite remain the same, that the promoter should have the land and there must be a duly passed map as far as the promoter is concerned. So this is the minimum requirement. Other than that, there are affidavits and there are so many other formalities which are required for a registration. Yes, there is a legal provision. It can be done.
Only in UP or this is across the country?
No, this is across the country. That provision runs across the country.
Because we have similar queries coming from Pune, we have somebody from Bengaluru who has written in.
Yeah.
So clearly this is a running problem.
The process of approval of map outside the planning area varies. In some places, for example, even in planning area, it's the municipal bodies which do approvals. Here, for example, the industrial development or the housing development authorities do it.
So it is mandatory to get it registered, or it depends on the developer to register it?
If you have to market,
It is
it
mandatory.
is mandatory to register.
Okay.
If you want to do it for fun and build a multi-storied and keep it for yourself, you don't have to. Yeah.
Last question of the day: can a builder cancel cancel the booking after being paid 90% of the payment and resell the flat?
See, normally, if the last 10% there are large number of reminders, normally what builders do is that if somebody has paid 90%, they do give you sufficient time to pay 10%.
You take position.
But in case the project does not get OC or a CC at that time, they are still insisting on the last payment which is to be given on possession and still cancel it. Such matters can be taken up in RERA for sure.
There are a lot of you whose questions are still coming in and we haven't been able to answer them. And many of them are from other states as well. What we can promise is Mr. Rajiv Kumar was kind enough to come and address consumers and take their queries. And it has been a great session, sir. You have not dodged any query, or you have actually addressed consumer queries. We promise you that we will try to work with other RERA chairmen as well, so that we can get your questions addressed by the respective RERA chairman. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
joining
much.
us.
Thank you
And
very much, Mr.
we ran a poll. Do you think Stress Fund can complete your project? 56% say yes, 44% still don't believe that the Stress Funds will complete their projects. This takes me to 2 or 3 comments right at the end, where there's Shravan Kumar who said trust deficit is a big issue. Nobody wants to put white money on real estate now. Rebuilding trust requires finishing this messy situation. As Mr. Kumar said, the effort is to find solutions. It's not going to be an easy exit out of this messy situation. But the fact that a RERA chairman can come on a show like ours and address your queries upfront, telling you what the ground reality is, that shows that there is a small upward graph. How long it takes?
Together we can work it out surely.
Absolutely, sir. On that positive note, thank you so much for joining this Week in Property. I'm Jayashree Kurup. This is Prabhakar Sinha, and we have the UP RERA chairman, Mr. Rajiv Kumar.
Thanks a lot.